All right, we're recording.
Awesome. What's up,
Welcome
everyone?
to the Max Revenue Show. I am your host, Trey Shields, along with the Zen Master of Commercial Insurance, Micah Salas. Micah, what's the word?
Man, I'm just happy to be alive. It's very sad, though. My Green Bay Packers lost to the 49ers on Saturday, which was a total joke. We should have won. But other than that, life's good.
When you watch that game, do you think that Green Bay is a better team than San Francisco?
That's what hurts so much about this is I genuinely think we outplayed them. If we would have went into that game and lost like the Houston Texans lost, where they just kind of got, manhandled by, I forgot who they played, but I would have been like, yeah, that's fine. We were a 7 seed, but we were getting hot at the right time. And if you've watched the NFL the last couple of years, it's all how you play the last
Mhm.
eight games going into the playoffs, which kind of speaks to the topic of this show, the long game, I guess you could say. I wasn't even planning on making that bridge, but yeah,
Hi-oh, look at that. Wow,
just
what a
happens.
segue.
I wasn't even trying to do
Incredible.
that. Oh,
So, the title of today's episode is How to Play the Long Game. And if you are a subscriber to the Max Revenue Letter, you got a email that went out last night with the same title, where we talk about how to play the long game, why playing the long game is a better game to play. And, I just wrote down a number of ideas and thoughts and observations that I've had about playing the long game in producer land. So it's gotten a lot of good feedback so far. It seems to have struck a nerve more than most. I got a bunch of emails late last night and this morning that's like, oh man, I really appreciate it. Right message, right time, whatever. So for those of you that read it and got something out of it, that's awesome. Um, so I'm gonna turn it over to you. You want to take the ball and run with it, and then we can go through and hit the highlights of what I wrote down, or if there's just something that you want to jam on, go ahead. Talk about playing the long game as a producer.
yeah. Well, and I read your letter, and then this weekend, you kind of get bored. You scroll YouTube a little bit or whatever, and I saw a Joe Rogan clip, so I had to click it to watch it, and it just made me think of this topic of playing the long game. So he's on there talking with, I don't remember who, some film producer. I think the guy who heads up Paramount. But
Taylor Sheridan, the guy who did Sheridan, the guy who did
Yellowstone?
yes.
Yeah, that's right. And they were talking, and he was, I don't know how, I just watched the short clips. I didn't see the whole thing. But Joe was talking about Yuri Bezmenov, a former KGB spy who basically had this interview from the 80s that was like, this is how Russia will, I don't know if it was Russia, I believe, right? This is the game they're playing. This is how they'll infiltrate things. They'll start with the schools, and then but they're on a 30-year time frame. And then and Joe was kind of talking like, yeah, you look now where we're at. The guys thought he was nuts back in the 80s, but you watch his interview back and you're like, holy, you know, everything is every box is checked. Like this is happening, and it was just eye opening, right? And I'm not trying to make any political statements here or anything. I'm just saying like pretty, that's how you play the long game, right? You got to be willing to be patient, and it takes time to see whatever you're trying to achieve come to fruition. And I've heard this a lot about like you talk to like financial guys. I think Patrick Bet David and some other, Ray Dalio people. They talk about China, and like they're like, hey, the U.S. we always think in terms of like the next election cycle, 4 years. Well, China thinks in the long game, right? They're thinking about like 50 years, like where they'll be. And so just think about the economy and the financial side of things. So, anyways, that's what you and I were kind of spitballing a little before this we got on the podcast here. And I was like, I kind of had some thoughts that were interesting and tied into the long game side of things. Um, but yeah, when it comes to being an insurance producer and playing the long game, I mean, I think your letter, if people haven't read it, you lay it out perfectly, very eloquently. I was very impressed.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Um, I'll hit on. Do you want me to run through them and then you chime in, or?
No, go ahead. Just
Yeah,
whatever. All right.
yeah.
Well,
I
I'll start
mean,
with this. I'll start with this. And this goes back to a couple podcasts ago. and I saved it for point number 5. But it's basically like we get caught in the trap of living and dying by every deal. It's like we got to have this deal, and we hard sell, and it's super common in our industry. And at the end of the day, most of the time, when I see other producers, when I've seen that I'm doing it, I'm not thinking about the long term, right? I'm just like, I got to have this sale today. And so I do whatever I can to get it across the finish line. And it's normally because your pipeline sucks and you have not continued to prospect. And because your pipeline is weak, then you have to sell from a place of fear and desperation because you're only getting 6 to 7 at bats this year. You better damn well convert, all of them. And so if I can give, I think the overarching theme to all of this is number one, be patient, but secondly, like prospecting just has to be a pillar to production. And we put it aside and we don't want to do it. But if we will just keep prospecting and keep that pipeline full, then we don't have to sell from fear and desperation. Because if they're not interested in the deal we're interested is not, if the deal we're working is not interested, who cares? We just go on to the next one because we've got a roster of prospects. We don't have to live and die by that deal. Okay, now I'll turn it over to you.
I agree with everything you just said. I think to underscore something specifically, it's like you have no leverage. If you don't have your pipeline is your leverage when you are out there looking at new prospects. You know, it's just like, so I started over 2 years ago. You did a year ago. The reason that we know it's hard, we're saying play the long game, but we both know that's easy to say and hard to actually do is because we're we're in the trenches right now, like doing that. And so some of your principles, like I don't quote, I only work on BOR, can be very tough to stick to when you're rebuilding. And and I know this because right, I'm rebuilding. So I've had to make some exceptions, very rare ones, but I do have to make exceptions. But but it's also I find myself almost falling into the trap of going after stuff that I know I should not even make an exception for, right? And I've probably done that a couple times. To be totally honest with you guys, right? The last 2.5 years I've done that and I've fallen on my face. It was stupid, waste of time, and so lesson learned. But one of the things, and my agency I would say does a great job at this. But if you're an agency principal or manager listening, this is one of the reasons I think runway is so important. And like when I say runway, I mean how much time are you going to give your new producers to actually validate? Because if your philosophy is, hey, what have you done for me? We're at 6 months, we're at a year where you don't have 200 on the books, you're done, dude. Right now, if that's your agency's philosophy, you're going to make a lot of your agents start to scramble and just go at chase things, and they're going to suck up your staff's time and just waste their own time, and then they're going to fail, right? And you're going to lose money, and everyone's going to be unhappy. And so that's where I think like you got to be in it for the long haul. And actually, to bring in another story, the Detroit Lions just won. They're going to the NFC Championship, and there was I don't know if it's Chris Collinsworth or whatever was saying that like the owner brought in Dan Campbell in 2021, and I don't know what the record was the first year. I think it was like 4 wins or something. And she said, "I'm not going to change coaches after year one. We've had a history of doing that the last 30 years, and look how that's panned out. They went through a coach every 2-3 years, and she stuck with Dan Campbell, and now look at they're at a 12-win season. They were on the verge of a Super Bowl." And so I think sometimes as agencies we can get so caught up in like, hey, not working out, next agent, fire that guy, bring in the next agent. And all that does is it creates a bad reputation for you in the workplace. Culturally speaking, people speak, they know that, and they don't want to go to your agency. And then two, if you're an agent, it just creates a lot of undue stress and chasing things that don't make a ton of sense, and I think will ultimately lead to failure, or they'll just be unprofitable business and things like that. So, of course, I'm not saying if you have someone that's just not working out, you don't give them 5 years, and just if you already see the signs in year 1 or 2. I just think that we're looking at the wrong signals. I think if you look at just pure production in year one, that's the wrong thing to look at. I think you got to be looking at the person's attitude, their action, either their effort in terms of the prospecting, and they just have that kind of that it factor, like they're trying, they're working hard, they're coachable, they're putting in the right activities, they're disciplined. If I had someone doing that in the first year and their numbers sucked, I would stick it out and be like, okay, I'm going to give them, and then you got to give them a vote of confidence. Like, hey, man, your numbers suck right now, right? Like if I was coaching a young producer, I'd be like, your numbers suck, to be real. Like there's zero. I would have hoped you to be at 50K at this point, but you're doing the right you have the right actions, you have a great attitude. I'm going to stick with you. You have my commitment. You got 2 more years. So keep at it, you know? And so I think that's part of the problem, right? It's just this vicious cycle. Like agents feel the pressure and, to perform in a short amount of time, and then they start chasing stuff. And I don't know. Am I wrong? Is that
No,
what it seems like to you?
I no, that's, I mean, yeah, that's how it goes. I know for me personally, I didn't need the outside pressure because I put it on myself. Um, but I tell you this, I've been having calls with a bunch of different producers lately. You probably saw where I sent out my calendar link and just powwowing with some people. And it's funny because some are older producers, some are newer producers, and those newer producers that are going through validation. It's funny because I'll talk to some of them and they're like, "Yeah, I'm behind, but dude, my agency owner, my principal, like he's behind me 100%. Like we're good." And other people are like sweating bullets. They're like, "Dude, I don't know if I'm gonna make it to the end of the month." And so it's just funny that the different things that people experience. But real quick, I think a great testament to playing the long game, and I want to go back to from a producer standpoint, is I want you to talk about your year so far and talk about basically the opportunities that are coming your way, because it's fascinating to me is like the underlying thing behind all of it is every deal, every meeting, all of your stuff so far this year has been follow-ups from previous years. So in the newsletter I talked about this, and talking about that patience and time are like the ultimate pipeline builders. And I'm watching it in real time with you. You've been calling on the same geographic area for what, 7, 8, 9, 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
These guys, you recognize them, they recognize you. Like it's just by sheer time and attrition of chipping away. These people you talked to 3, 4 years ago, they weren't ready, it's not right. And then now, just by showing up every year and staying in front of them and playing the long game instead of trying to hard sell or, hey, can I just quote you this year? Now you're like, dude, your pipeline, it's insane. You're busting at the seams. So talk about your year so far.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. And I feel like I still feel like I have a long ways to go, but from just a meeting standpoint, it was really interesting. I think this is how this topic kind of came to fruition in our minds at first was the first 2 weeks out the gate this 2024. I had set like 9 meetings, which is really high. I mean, usually I'm happy to get 1 to 2 a week. We're doing mid-market prospecting, right? I'm not calling tiny companies. So, but dude, I set 9 meetings, and I looked back at every single meeting I set with all 9, and they were all not. None of them were first calls. They were none of first call closes, right? They were all follow-up calls, and some of them were from 3 months ago, some were from July, some were from almost a year ago. And I just, this is a good thing. Ian and I were talking about this in our series, Diary of a New Producer. When you call these people back, there's 2 things I think tactically I'd share with you guys listening. Is one is after you call them, you have a good decent conversation. They say follow up later. You know, take good notes, but then send them something in between, right? Just one thing. Like, and for me, I wrote a book, so this kind of helped stay top of mind, I think, right? So anyone I talk to that we have a decent conversation, I send a book, but maybe it's a handwritten article. Maybe you do a newsletter or whatever, or just find a really interesting article. Just send them one thing. I think that's all you got to do. I don't think you got to harass them every month. Stop in. I think that's overkill. And then the other thing is follow up when you say you're going to follow up. Put it in your CRM system and then follow up on that time, but be very specific when you call them back or you send them that follow up email. So I always, if I'm going to do it on phone, I call them. I have my notes there. I get them on the phone. I'm like, hey Jenny, Micah, you probably don't remember me. And then if they say yeah, great, it's awesome. If they say no, yeah, well, hey, we spoke this date. I'll say the exact date. You had a claim in 2020. I know you were kind of happy with your agent. Nothing ever happened. Hey, it's been 2 years. I just figured I'd follow up with you to see if it was on your radar right now. And I just, actually, that was meeting number 10 was last week I just sent. 2 years ago, last time I talked to him, but I got extremely specific when I called him back, thanks to my CRM and to my notes, right? So, um, and then on email, I forward the email. So this was another one I sent 2 weeks ago, set 2 weeks ago. Guy emailed me back last February. Hey, not interested right now. We're set, but next year I actually would be interested. Now, we hear that all the time, right? Never contacted the guy once. I think I just sent him a one follow up note. Hadn't talked to him in almost a year. Forwarded his email from last year, and even in the subject line it said Tom sent me. Tom was his boss, and he's the CFO. And I just said, hey man, following up on last year, you told me to follow up. Did the email back? Yeah, that'd be actually we are very interested in talking. Got the meeting set. So there's nothing magic. I'm like I didn't do anything special, right? This is just sales tactics 101, like prospecting 101. This is how you follow up with people, and you've got to be organized because if you're not, you're just going to miss so many opportunities.
That's a
So that
really great point. I didn't
yeah,
put that in the newsletter, but now that you say it, it sticks out like a sore thumb. It's like in order to play the long game and prospecting and producing and all that, like you've got to be organized. You've got to take diligent notes. You've got to put it in CRM. You've got to set task reminders. He is either producers that I have worked with or just people that I've on the phone. It's funny to me how many people just totally run their whole operation and don't either they have a CRM and they don't use it, or a lot of them just don't even have a damn CRM.
dude, it's
They're like,
wild.
oh well, my agency has Salesforce, but I don't use it. And it's like that tells me two things. Either one, you're not actually really prospecting at the volume you should, because if you were, you would have to use a CRM. Or number two, you are prospecting at the volume of you should, and you just like you are leaving so much deal flow on the table because you can't possibly remember this follow up, that task, this reminder. People, get a CRM, and if you have it, which I'm sure most of you do, use the damn thing. I mean, good God Almighty, it's like I
Invest in
just
yourself, bro. It's like I can't deal with people that I talk to and they're like, they're sitting debating a $50 a month investment into a CRM or 100. I don't care if it's 100. If my agency didn't provide one, I would pay 200 a month because it's that critical. It's like that's like literally probably one of the things that should be a requirement for being a salesperson. And it's weird. Tech sales, everyone else uses them religiously, but in insurance, and this goes back to like I think the whole networking and like that whole game and like you got to know people. It's like you kept a stack of business cards and we kind of keep in touch with your COIs. Like times are changing, and like I did a video on this last week on our YouTube channel about like is $1 million book still like the creme de la creme? Like the shiznit. Like
the
and
holy grail.
yeah, the holy grail. And one of the arguments against why it's not is because technology, right? And like CRM system, and that's basically CRM and phone, and we're not on fax. We're not having to stop by and drive out to see people all the time. So you can be a lot more efficient and effective in a shorter amount of time. And so yeah, CRM is just man, it's
You know that
critical.
meme that's like, tell me you're blank without telling me you're blank. You know what I'm
Yeah,
talking about?
yeah.
So it's like I don't use a CR. Someone that would be a great meme. Like I don't use a CRM, and the meme, the tagline would be like, "Tell me your volume sucks without telling me your volume sucks."
Yeah. No, that's funny. That's gosh, I can't even imagine it, man. Can't even imagine not using one. And I never thought that was possible until I got into insurance. So when I got I shouldn't even say got into insurance. When I got into insurance, it was with Federated. Now Federated was very religious with using our internal CRM system, and that's what I think it just reinforced what I've already was taught outside the insurance industry. But then when I got into the agency side, that's where I was just blown away at the lack of CRM use. I mean, it didn't matter if the guys were old, young, whatever. I'm like, what is going on here? And this was a big agency, right? Now I know they're all making pushes to get people on CRMs, and that was like pulling teeth for some producers. But I just never understood why it was pulling teeth. It's like, yeah.
That
So
ain't that ain't how they did it in their day, Michael.
yeah, yeah. Um, so yeah, back to I think you asked about some result. Yeah, so that was all the meetings, and then yeah, just new business. I mean, I could go down my list of new clients I've brought on board the last 2.5 years since being here, and I think you had asked me this, and I'm like, I literally very few of them were first time cold call to meeting to sale. Like it was like called them in February. Nah, call me back next year. Called them, you know, got the meeting and then it boom. But I always say this. I wish I trademarked it, but cold calls today are warm calls tomorrow. Like that, that's so true. That's what you're doing when you're
I
cold
think I
calling.
said that, didn't I? Did
Well,
I say that?
you said it, but I said that like 5 years ago.
Oh,
I have
somebody.
receipts on that too.
Do you really?
Oh yeah, it's on LinkedIn somewhere. Because I know I said it back in like
Yeah.
2020.
All right.
I don't know.
Fair enough.
But I'm sure
Um,
some other sales guru said it in the 90s or something. But yeah.
so there's kind of two parts to the long game. It's like, okay, obviously the long game as far as opening up the door, but let's also talk about closing deals because what you see a lot of time is you get in the door, whether you've been patient or not getting in, right? Like what you're talking about, whether it's first year, third year, fourth year, you get in the door, and then you're kind of you get their stuff. Maybe you're going through like they're going through broker selection, or God forbid you're quoting, but it's like you're kind of on third base, and it's this double-edged sword where I'm all for fighting and scrapping and clawing to get the deal,
Hmm.
okay, but at the same time, it can't come it can't come at the expense of the relationship and the long term of that account. So like if you've got to hard sell or really push your point of view, or for God's sake, I've made this mistake, like giving somebody an ultimatum that I wasn't willing to hold them to, you know. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, I mean, it's kind of take it or leave it, and like just these hard sales tactics, you know, there's also the playing the long game on the end of the deal too. So talk a little bit about kind of the end process of the deals and how you work it to the end and what the responses are that you hear, and just kind of how you think about the end of it and playing the long game.
Yeah. Sure. So one thing I think that's interesting is there's different phases in the sale, but you get that first meeting, let's just say, this is one example, and you explain the process, how the game works, and tell them why it makes sense to use exclusive one agent. You want to do due diligence, and you have to be prepared because in that first meeting, if you're not hearing no more, I think there's something wrong. I think you're probably giving in too much because most people take a first meeting with you because they want to get a quote in their mind. Even though if you don't say that or think it on that first call, that's what they're thinking. Even if you say I want to do due diligence, they're still thinking quote. You get to the first meeting and that's what they're thinking. This happens to me so much. Sure, I can't tell you how many times this happens, man. I get there, I explain the game, walk through things. They see the light like, yeah, quoting makes no sense. And then we kind of both come to this agreement like, why the hell am I here? Like, yeah, and they're like, yeah, I really love my agent. He quotes every year. I think our price, I could verify their pricing, I guess you could say, but overall, it's like they have no pain points. They only wanted a quote, and then we both mutually go our separate ways, and they thank me so much for just explaining how things work and not wasting their time. And that's what happens a lot. And if you're playing the short game, that sucks. If you're playing the long game, that's a win.
Yeah, that's probably the most valuable thing. Yeah, that is what you just said is, man, so valuable. Really wish I would have known that early on, because you're trying to force everything across the finish line. But two things happen when you do that. When you're willing to walk away, number one, it just builds trust with the prospect, right?
You know?
So they'll circle back with you in the future. And secondly, it's like when they're going to continue to do things their way. And if you just give in to quoting, now you've just put yourself in the same position as everybody else. But when shit does hit the fan, and they are like, hey, you remember that one guy like 2 years ago that came in and talked to us about a new way of doing it? You set yourself apart by doing that. When you stick to your guns, you're willing to walk away, and you're willing to walk away because your pipeline's full because you don't need this deal. Then long term, you reach out to them again, you stay in contact, you see them at a convention or whatever. You're like that, especially when things are going bad. You're like that girl that they couldn't get. They're like, something. There was something interesting about that guy or that gal.
Mhm.
Let's call him. Let's see what he's up to. I want to talk to him again. But you just can't do that when you're playing the quoting game and it's like kill, kill, kill right now. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah. Another area that I think this is demonstrated is so after, okay, that's first meeting. Then you come back and you do the presentation. And if you're playing the short game, what you can maybe do is make mountains out of molehills, right? Talk about
Mm.
talk about losing credibility. You come out there trying to say, "Oh my God, your lock and key replacement's only at $5,000. That's terrible." Like, you know, that is the surefire way to just in a prospect's mind be like, "Dude, what's this guy coming out here giving a sales pitch? I thought he was doing due diligence." So you just lied, right? You blew all your credit because if you're selling the due diligence properly, you're really trying to be as objective as possible. Now, there's some salesmanship stuff to it. I'm not saying we're purely objective in it. Our goal is to be hired, and we tell them that. But I think it's important to build credibility. When I say that, I'm like, yeah, I'd love to be hired. I'd love to work with you, but I'm not going to come back out here and make mountains out of molehills. I'm not going to come out here and bash your agent. And if you're playing the short game, you're going to fall into that trap because you're like, oh, shoot, man, I looked at this policy, found nothing. They told me in the research call that their agent's doing this and this and this. Their service is great. How can I get this deal? That's the short game thinking. Long game thinking's like, dude, they're taken care of. I can't really help them. I got to just tell them that. Guess what? You can still come back, have a good meeting, present, verify things, and you're just doing what you said. That's how you build. That's how you play the long game. You do what you're going to say. You build your reputation on that, and they remember. And I'll share a story on that quick. Is my first deal I won at my new agency. I got a call from a client I proposed back in like 2018. Um, 2 years in a row, never won it, but had tried doing due diligence, presented, reviewed. They just love their agent. Well, their agent had left. I hadn't talked to him in like 2 years. I get a random phone call, and she was like, "Hey, our agent left. It's been terrible. We always liked what you presented. Can we work together?" Had the BORs in 2 weeks. Didn't have to do any presentation, whatever. She remembered that from doing stuff right the first time. And I didn't bash her 20-year relationship, right? Because she loved that agent. And it doesn't always work out that way, but I think that's just a crystal clear example of playing the long game.
Yeah, that's great. They real quick before you go to the next one, they have this saying in marketing that's like your customer's not stupid, it's your mom. It's like same thing with prospects. Is like these business owners, your prospects, they're not stupid, right? They know what you're doing. Like give them more credit than that instead of trying to come in and hoodwink them on, like you said, lock and key replacement. Like
Yeah,
treat them with respect. Don't be an idiot. Don't come in trying to burn the house down because all you're going to do is just burn the bridge for the huge future. Go
yeah.
ahead.
I'll I have to go off topic for a second, but it's kind of related. But you talked about like your clients aren't stupid, and don't make them feel stupid or make mountains out of molehills. So I was reading World Economic Forum met last week.
Oh, here we
All,
go. Here we go. Get your tinfoil hats on, baby.
no. Hey, they're legit. Go check it out if you want to go check it out. Um, well, anyways, there's this annual risk report, right, of the top risks that we face globally in 2024. So if I asked you, what's the second biggest risk that we face globally? And so, like, if you're talking to a business owner and you're trying to like give them some value and try to show your prestige and like your knowledge of the industry, and you go drop off a marketing piece that says, "Hey, here's your top risk for 2024." What do you think number two would be on this list?
Well, I know the answers because I'm also a fellow quasi conspiracy theorist. So I already know this answer. So I'm going to bow out.
Okay, all right. So the reason I thought of this is because we talk about we're selling to mid market companies, and a lot of these are small business owners, 5 million to 100 million in sales, right? Well, on this list, the number two biggest threat to their business is misinformation and disinformation. Now, I'm not even going to get into my thoughts on that, but all I'm going to say is if you're out there prospecting and you're dropping like you see this report, you're like, I'm going to drop this off of this prospects. Now, maybe Fortune 500s would care about that, But if you're a mid-market producer, they don't give a rip, dude, about misinformation and disinformation. They care about finding an employee, right? They care about their insurance premiums being lower. They care about why is my renewal last minute. They care, so what I mean? They don't care about, they want their certs in time so they can get paid. They don't care about misinformation and disinformation, right? Like it doesn't impact their business at all. And
I
I only thought of that because you were just when you had mentioned like making mountains out of molehills, lock and key replacement. But I think when you're talking to business owners, they're smarter than you think, and you just need to basically understand their business and demonstrate that you understand it. And that's why I like the due diligence process. And that's what you should be doing throughout the process. Is trying to understand people's business. Yeah.
but I'm just writing this down. I'll make sure to add this to the how to play the long game. Do not bring propaganda from Klaus Schwab, comma, World Economic Forum, comma, and the intellectual elites to the mid-market blue-collar business owner. Period. Okay, I got it.
That's awesome. That's a tweet right there.
Yeah.
And I was trying to make a meme out of it. And I couldn't figure out, the clown meme where it's like he starts to put the face on, and then at the bottom he's a full blown clown. And I was trying to think like, how could I make a meme out of this? But I couldn't get it to work. That's what I do for fun on the weekends, guys.
Yep.
But I kind of got off topic there. But back to the topic. The other benefit of playing the long game or long versus short, is when you win a business and you stick to like your principles and win them how the right way, and when you have the long game in mind, you keep the company, right? The renewals become easier because you won them because they understand the game. You spent time learning their business, you demonstrated your expertise of the market and their company, and they hired you, they trusted you. And I think this is probably one of the reasons that my retention rate is pretty dang high. And it's because I win clients that buy into the way that I want, you know what I mean, to do things. Like we agree on how insurance should be bought and how agents should be selected. And if I bring that type of person in, guess what? They're going to probably stick with me longer. And so you talk the ultimate long game in insurance is you got to be able to stack wins, right? You can't just have a new client come in and come out the back door a year, 2 years, or even 3 years later. If you can keep them 5, 6, 7 years to 10 years or plus, that's how you really play the long game. And that's how you really make money in insurance, right? I mean, you got to stack them.
Yeah, you're selecting your clients as much as your clients are selecting you.
Yep.
You're setting the frame, like what you're talking about. We talked about setting the frame in other podcasts, but it's like you're setting the frame and you're giving them the hurdles that they've got to jump through, right? They've got to have a certain, not worldview, but you know what I'm saying? They have to have a certain view of how things are done, or you educate them on how things are done, exactly like what you said, so that you're going to hold on to them longer because they are self-selecting into your long-term, long game thinking, and they're not just going to leave you at the drop of the hat when some Ronnie or Donnie comes in with some crazy spiel.
Absolutely.
What else you got for the long game?
I just want to say I really liked your point you made in the newsletter. And by the way, if you haven't subscribed to the Max Revenue newsletter, go do that. Comes to your inbox every Monday or Sunday.
Sunday night, baby.
Sunday night. Trey writes it, so I take zero credit for any of the content in there.
Well, all of it I just learned from you anyways. I just add my flair for the dramatic and ridiculousness.
Well, you do it well. You do it
Tomfoolery.
well. But I liked, prospects can live with the status quo far longer than you think. So I've said this before too, is like your biggest competition actually a lot of times isn't other agencies. It's the status quo or it's complacency. It's doing nothing, right? And that can be really that can mess with your head, right? When you're out there and you're like, why the heck is this person not going with me, dude? I'm the better agent, or they're unhappy. And if you're playing the long game, you just understand that this is how it goes, and that's actually a good thing that insurance buyers are like that, because that's why if you can make it, your retention will also be higher, because it's like, people don't like to change, right? So it's also kind of when you're playing the long game, it's also a mindset thing. And I think it helps you like emotionally and just yeah, really and emotionally, right? Because if you're like, man, what the heck's going on? These people aren't coming with me. They're just staying put. Like that's going to just start to wear you down, and I think
Yep.
your results will suffer for that too. So I think that's just a really good point that you like the status quo, and that just people just and there's a risk to change, right? Like we
Yep.
think, oh my God, their agent's doing nothing. Guess what though? They've been buying from for 5 years, and guess yeah, they're doing nothing, but also nothing's gone wrong. So you're you know there's a downside risk potentially to changing, and every business owner is aware of that. So
So there's kind of two sides to the status quo, like busting them out of the status quo. Is number one, let's say that they know that they're where they're at suboptimal, right? That's one piece of it. And the other one is like they don't know what they don't know.
good
So
point.
on the first one, and I'm dealing with this guy still. I've sent this guy BORs 3 times, but like I just can't get him over. But that's fine. I just play the long game. He knows he's not in a good spot. He knows his agent is not where he's supposed to be. But that change, it just scares him, right? Because the
Mm-hmm.
devil that they know is better than the devil that they don't. And so it's my job to just keep nurturing that relationship. I'm not going to push him because if I push him and give him some ultimatum, then I'm done. Right. And then the other side of that is like a lot of times people stay with the status quo because they don't even know any better. Right. They
Yep.
don't know what they don't know. And that's where that education, that value piece comes in, like what you talked about earlier. You've got to, you've got to educate them on the things that they don't know. I'll give you an example. I won't say names, but I was around some people this weekend, and this, let's see how to say this without getting in trouble. Let's just say this: the person was morbidly obese,
Okay.
and they were talking about how to lose weight. And this person was talking to this morbidly obese person was talking to this person that's fit, and they were talking about diet and exercise. And the things that this obese person didn't know as they were discussing how to lose weight, it literally blew my mind. Like calories, energy in, out, like all these basic things that you take for granted. This lady had no concept of it. She'd never been taught it. Right. So instead of like going back to our producer analogy, it's like your prospects don't know what they don't know. You can't force, like you can force your point of view all they want, but if they don't know that the sky is blue, good luck telling them, like you've got to show it to them. You've got to open their eyes to what they don't know. Go ahead.
That's a great point. As you were talking, I thought of something, and it kind of relates to your point number 3 you made in the letter about time is the ultimate pipeline builder, which great quote. I don't know who said that to you, but
Nah, that's me, bro. That's me, dog.
oh, so I thought it was a private equity buddy of yours.
No, I
Oh,
had the
he didn't
headline.
say
He
that.
had the quote. Nah,
Gotcha.
bro.
Okay.
I'm a walking tweet. I'm a walking tweet machine,
Who
There's
those
not a
can't.
lot of depth. There's not a lot of depth here, but if you need surface level bangers, I'm your guy.
By the way, if you're not subscribed to us on YouTube, go subscribe because that's where you can watch us actually go back and forth on our banter. And I was just bowing down to the Dalai Lama of tweeting insurance content
Mm-hmm.
ratios.
Mediocre at best producer, dynamite content and content creator.
Put that on your resume if you're ever looking to join a new agency. Like, dude, I'm okay at producing, but I crush it on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Bro, yeah, I can
Uh,
stir the pot, baby. Go
I
ahead.
can get 50 likes. I can't write 50 in
Yes.
revenue, but I can get 50 likes every post.
Amen. Amen.
All right, so I've said this before too, but so give me some props where they're due. But take your 3-star prospects to the 5-star, right? That's all long game. That's playing the long game as well. So sometimes you might think, well, so you're saying think long game, try not write or big picture, try not write small accounts. No, actually, this is where I think you can beat out some if you're a smaller agency, beat out some of the bigger guys because they're not going to go write the stuff that's less than 10 in revenue. But when you go after those people, if you're playing the long game, if you're first of all, let's start here. If you're playing a short game, you'll go find the guy paying 5K of commissions total. And you'll be like, yeah, this is awesome, but he's the quoter. He's never grown. He's been around for 30 years. It's the biggest he's going to get. you're playing the long game, you might write a guy that only pays 2K in commissions, but it's a young dude. He's hungry. He's in year 3, and you just know he's kind of laying that groundwork. But you see the long-term vision. You ask him where he wants to go in 5 years, and you see that he wants to grow. Well, dude, latch onto that. Latch your carriage onto that horse or whatever, and then watch him grow. And I was just writing
Good
some
point.
quick numbers. When I was at Marsh, I had 4. I was just thinking of 3 accounts I wrote, 3 of my bigger accounts. Dude, one started out at 60K of revenue, one was 25K, one was 25K. The 60K was like 175 by the time I left, or 200K almost. Another 25K was set. 2 other 25Ks were at 75K. We picked up the bonds. They grew, they expanded, but all those people had something in common. They were trying to grow. And so I latched onto them. But if you're playing the short game, you might walk away from some of those. Now those were all decent sized deals to start with, but let's just say your threshold, you're at like a really big agency. They're like, we don't want stuff below 30, 40K of revenue. It's a waste of my time. Well, perfect example. Those 2 of those deals, 25K grew to 75K deals that anyone would love. But just don't fall into that trap either of excluding people who are smaller and say, well, I'm playing the long game. I only write big stuff. No, you got to, it's more of a mindset, of the business owners.
Yeah, with a lot of these producers that I'm talking to at the moment, a lot of our audience. Now, we have a lot of an audience that's at ABC, sure, but I would say probably 60% is kind of either your smaller or your regional agency, some mom and pop too, and that's always their question. Is they're like, it's Gallagher, it's Marsh, it's Aon, USI. They're running into these big guys, and either A, maybe they're a little bit intimidated, or B, they're like, how do I win against those guys? And so I think that's a great point. Is these ABC shops, and not all of them, but they're raising those minimum revenues that they ask their agents to go after. So that if you could, like, that sweet spot, if you're a regional or small agency, that 2,500 to 15,000, 20,000, maybe even 25,000. That's a newer company that's in growth mode. Man, that is a huge place to win, because a lot of these big shops, they've got a 5,000, a 10,000, 25,000, a $40 minimum revenue, and that lower mid market is a huge place to win. That's where you can win. Not that you can't win bigger stuff, but I'm just saying, like, man, they're underserved. They're underserved for sure, at least in my experience.
Yeah, no, 100%. And even if they're not underserved, it's the optics of things, right? And so I just had a prospect meeting last week, and they're with a top 10 agency, and they're about 20 in revenue. And go out there, met with them, and we just started talking. They really no pain, no issues. But what came up in the conversation was like, we just feel like we're a really small fish in a big pond. Like, we just, like, the owners really want like more of a personal relationship. And I was like, and then I ended up, by the end of it, kind of told our story and my story, why I left the really big shop for this smaller firm. And again, these guys are paying 20K in revenue, probably 200 in premium, 150 in premium. And it kind of like really struck me, like, if you're listening to this and you're a smaller agency out there, that's the angle you got to take, right? Is like, I know it sounds kind of old school, but that is the angle you take. Is like, hey, you're going to be a really big deal to not only me but our whole agency, right? We can't afford to lose you. Let's say you're competing on a 20K deal versus one of the big guys, Marsh or whoever. I don't care. That's the angle you take, and that's one of the things you got to be trying to exploit, because they're going to go the other way. They're going to say, hey, we have all this leverage, blah blah blah, and you just can't compete on that. And so what you can compete on is that talk track. Now, the other thing I'm going to share, this is a nugget for anyone listening, that I don't think many people are saying this. If you're not, and you might not be able to say it based on your agency and how they pay commissions. My agency pays the same new and renewal. Now, if you know what your competition pays, that can be helpful. But one of the things I said to him, I said, my other agency, we got a growth bonus element, and then the commission dropped, right, kind of to this level. My agency I'm at now pays the same new and renewal, and it's 15 points higher than where I was previously at. Now, why do we do that? We do that because we want to promote the agents staying involved with their accounts, not just year 1, but year 2, 3, 4, for the life of the deal. We really promote
Mm.
relationship. The big shops are paying 25 because they have all these resources and all this other stuff. But guess who they want out of that deal after year one? And guess why they're paying a growth bonus on year one and a higher split on year one? Because they want new for that top line. And then it's just built into their system. There's nothing wrong with it, but that's the way they're set up. Now, if you're listening to this and you're a big shop and you're like, oh my God, that's not correct. Hey, I'm just trying to teach people how to sell against bigger shops. I'll tell you how to sell against smaller shops. And you know that leverage, buying power. I used to sell that stuff. So, and I've done YouTube videos on this stuff too, selling versus big and selling versus small. So I'm speaking to everyone, but
Right.
that's how you sell against big boys. That's just one kind of
Yeah.
thing that I've never heard anyone talk about that. And I think it's,
Hmm.
anytime I said it, a buyer's like, damn, that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
Because it does.
Giving away all the secrets. I
I don't,
almost stopped you there.
I didn't even put that one in the course, dude.
That's very nice.
I should have.
All right, let's go over the kind of the last point we haven't touched on is the lowest hanging fruit often spoils the fastest. What do you think about that? I also came up with that banger. So
You
tell
know
me
what's
what you think
funny,
about
dude?
that point.
Don't toot your horn too much because go look at my LinkedIn and go look at my articles that I wrote. And if you go to my LinkedIn on from 2018,
Oh, Jesus. Here we go. That's the beauty of having 5 years of content is because you can just
uh,
when you've written every day for 5 years, you can just go back and be like, oh, I said that in 2019, bro.
no, this wasn't even a post on it. This was actually an article, which I don't even know how to find. How do you find articles that you've written on
I don't
LinkedIn?
think that's really like a thing anymore.
Featured images. I can't even find it, dude. That's ridiculous. Uh, Posts. Yeah, you can't even search articles, like past articles. I wish I could find it. I had a picture of Snow White taking a bite of the apple, and basically I
Oh
was like,
shit.
I literally said the no, low hanging fruit isn't always as sweet as it might seem to be, or something. Like literally, exactly. So
Oh no.
I was like, did Trey go back and look at my past content? There's nothing original, dude. Nothing original, but it
No,
was great.
nothing original. No.
Anyways, so I say all
I
that.
did
I
come
agree
up
with
with
you.
that. I was very proud of myself, but clearly we're drawing from the same source somewhere. So yeah.
Yeah, man. Anyways, but no. So to your point, let me pull that up. Low hanging fruit isn't the sweetest, or spoils the fastest. Yeah. Oh yeah. So what I liked from this is, this guy was chasing that you talked about in there, and he lost 75% of his book in year three, right? Because he had a program business, and not saying that programs business isn't a good way to build your book, but you have to be kind of careful. And I would try to diversify a little bit, especially if you're playing the
Well,
long game.
he was chasing new venture trucking, which those guys go belly up.
Yeah,
And
where
then
he should have done more established trucking and worked that in there and kind of mixed it.
yeah. It's like it's easy. A lot of these guys will chase smaller and I'm guilty right here. I chase smaller trucking.
Oh yeah, dude.
But at the same time, you've gotta realize that if it's easy to write, number one, everybody else is doing it too, right? Because I can't
Yep.
tell you how many people are doing the exact same thing I'm doing. And then I just talked to a guy on the phone earlier this week. I had a call with a guy who's literally in my state doing exactly what I'm doing.
That's
Um,
funny.
and so not necessarily to diversify, like be a generalist, but you don't want to put all your eggs in just program business, or you don't want to chase like these high risk things that could go belly up or that are easy to write because then everybody's doing it. So you kind of want to go after some stuff that's got some hair on it. It creates more of a buffer. They might, like your whole process of due diligence and coming in and positioning and the value and the BOR. You are clients as they jump through hurdles with your self-selecting in, and at the end of this process, you're going to have a client that is in it with you for the long game, which is the title of this podcast. So sure, go after low-hanging fruit if you can get it. I'm guilty of it too, but also it's got to be combined with some longer term stuff. Play long-term games with long-term people. So
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. One thing that made me think of too is, well, one quick story. Talked to this guy that's now heads up an MGA, and he was telling me a story, and I told you this last week, but they had built up like a $12 million premium book and lost it all basically overnight just due to market changing and all that stuff. So just diversify, right? But also when you're making cold calls, Be leery of people who just want to meet immediately. Doesn't mean you take the meeting, but I'm saying go into that first meeting. Maybe one of your questions is like, hey, most people don't even want to meet with me. Why were you? I'm just curious. Like, why were you so excited or looking forward to talk today? Like, what's on your mind? What's going on, right? But just always know that in the back of your mind. And we get quotes every year on this time, and maybe you can kind of filter that out on the very first phone call. Maybe you don't actually
Yep.
need to meet with them, and just ask that extra question. So if they're like, yeah, I'd love to meet with you next week, and maybe even before you book me, like, yeah, I'd love to book the meeting. Just out of curiosity, though, most people I call don't really want to, aren't too excited to meet with me. Is there something you're looking to get out of next week's meeting? And maybe you save yourself a ton of time by driving 30 minutes to some meeting by just asking that extra follow-up question. And they're like, oh yeah, we quote every year. Well, okay, well, I'm actually not looking to quote. Can we just talk first? And now maybe, you see where I'm going. This is, you just save yourself some time. And yeah, go ahead.
We always, and I learned this from you, but we always talk about like there's three types of prospects. You got the people who are just married, they're not going to move no matter what, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum, you got the low hanging fruit, like they're in pain or they'll, whatever, that they'll take a meeting with you on the spot. And then you got those people in the middle that are like, they're kind of happy. Maybe they're in the status quo. They don't know what they don't know, but they're willing to take a look under the hood, right? And so we always want to go after the low hanging fruit or the people who are willing to take a look. Um, I think the more you can get that middle segment is the better client. Sure, you can write some low hanging fruit, either people in pain, but a lot of that low hanging fruit, like we're talking about, they're transactional buyers. They're people that don't understand how the game works. And sure, you can educate some of them, but just because it's low hanging fruit doesn't mean it's something you want to chase. You're going to build that long term book by going to people in the middle, the people who are willing to take a look under the hood and do due diligence.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was interesting on one thing I think I made on this, or a note I made on this on LinkedIn, was if you get a BOR too easy, you should always be scared, right? Like, that's another thing too. It's like if you go meet with someone like, hey, where do you got to sign? How can I move over? It's like, man, something seems off here, right? And then, lo and behold, the account goes bankrupt, or you find out they're like a mess to work with and everyone hates them and all that, right? So just
Yep.
keep that in mind.
Well, this is probably one of our longer podcasts.
Yeah, I
I
was
think
thinking, I'm
we
like,
have,
man, I'm kind of boring myself at this point. Maybe I should stop talking.
yeah, we have kicked this horse till it's just dead as a doorknob. But yeah, if you are not already a subscriber, go check out the Max Revenue Letter, link in the show notes. If you are ready to get off the sidelines and get some help with your prospecting and producing and learning how to sell with the BORs, you can check out the Producer Playbook. That's also in the show notes. And if you are not yet subbed to what Micah is doing on YouTube, you can go check out the Max Revenue Show on YouTube. Micah's got some really good stuff. Again, giving away all the good stuff for free on YouTube. Again, link in show notes. Go check it out. But with that, let's end the call. Micah, as always, it was a pleasure. And guys, give them hell this week. We appreciate you.
Adios.
All right. See y'all.
Later.